Fortress, Quarry, and Legend, 1000 to 1500 AD. As the medieval era progressed, the Colosseum gained new roles amid the turbulent politics of Rome. By around the 11th to 12th centuries, the local populace and authorities had largely withdrawn from using the amphitheater as living quarters or church space, and it fell into the hands of Rome's feuding noble families. The immense structure, with its thick walls and commanding position, was too strategically valuable to ignore in an age of baronial warfare. Thus, the Colosseum was transformed into a fortress. In the 11th century, the powerful Frangipani family took control of the Colosseum, fortifying it as a castle stronghold. They reinforced existing walls, closed off arches to create defensible positions, and likely built wooden palisades or small towers at the upper levels. The Colosseum's many entrances could be secured, turning it into a fortified compound that dominated the surrounding area. It provided the Frangipani with both a military advantage and a prestigious residence. They could quite literally live in the grandeur of ancient Rome while asserting their medieval power. In the 13th century, the Frangipani were displaced by another noble clan, the Annibaldi, who continued to use the Colosseum as a castle. The Annibaldi may have made further modifications, adapting the fortifications for then-modern warfare, like defending against siege engines, and perhaps partitioning parts of the interior for residences, storage, and even holding courts or markets. For several generations, Rome's greatest amphitheater was essentially a private citadel, its arches witnessing crossbow bolts instead of arrows, and its corridors patrolled by knights instead of gladiators. This martial chapter, however, did not last forever. A seismic event precipitated the Colosseum's final fall into obscurity, the Great Earthquake of 1349. This quake, one of the largest to hit Rome in the medieval period, caused the already weakened south side of the amphitheater to collapse in a massive heap of rubble. The entire outer facade on the southern half tumbled down. Fortunately, by then the Colosseum was no longer an actively defended fortress, but the damage was irreversible. The Frangipani/Annibaldi fort was effectively broken. The chunks of travertine that fell were carted away by whoever could claim them. In fact, the disaster became an opportunity for recycling on a grand scale. Much of the fallen stone and even standing stone from the Colosseum was hauled off to serve as building material in Rome's new constructions. Throughout the 14th and 15th centuries, the emptying of the Colosseum continued. Successive popes and noble families treated it as a quarry for ready-cut limestone and marble. The Barberini family, during Pope Urban VIII's reign in the 17th century, famously scavenged stone and iron from the Colosseum to build their Palazzo Barberini, giving rise to the quip, "What the barbarians did not do, the Barberini did." Earlier, Pope Nicholas V in the 15th century had openly permitted the removal of stone from the amphitheater to speed the construction of the new St. Peter's Basilica, rationalizing that repurposing the pagan ruins for a church was a pious trade-off. Blocks from the Colosseum thus found their way into the walls of St. Peter's and other churches. Its travertine was used in Palazzo Venezia and countless Renaissance buildings. Even the bronze clamps holding the stones were smelted for other projects. By 1500, the Colosseum had been stripped of most of its valuable marble facade and left as a ring of exposed brick and half-standing arches. 3/5 of its outer circumference was gone. Yet, even as it was exploited, the Colosseum was never forgotten. Throughout the later Middle Ages, Christian pilgrims included the site on their itineraries, viewing it as a place hallowed by the blood of martyrs, a notion propagated by church tradition. The surviving chapel of Santa Maria della Pietà in its archway continued to be tended by religious orders. In 1675, Pope Innocent XI even asked the famous architect Gian Lorenzo Bernini to design a grand church to sit inside the Colosseum's arena, effectively converting the pagan stadium into a monumental shrine. Bernini, however, demurred. He reportedly refused, saying the Colosseum itself was a monument that should remain untouched as a testament to the greatness of Rome and of architecture. This enlightened view foreshadowed a shift that was coming. By the end of the 17th century, attitudes were moving away from using the Colosseum as a mere source of stone and toward preserving it as an antique wonder worthy of respect. Renaissance and papal protection, 1400 to 1700 AD. The Renaissance, with its rebirth of interest in classical antiquity, marked the turning point in the Colosseum's fortunes. As early as the 15th century, Renaissance humanist scholars and architects began to study the ancient ruins of Rome systematically. The Colosseum, being one of the largest and most impressive, drew particular attention. Antiquarians measured its dimensions, sketched its remaining arcades, and scoured Latin texts for references to its past. Figures like Flavio Biondo and Leon Battista Alberti wrote about the Colosseum, trying to puzzle out how it was built and used, treating it as a window into the lost world of the Caesars. These studies helped reframe the Colosseum from a debris pile into a cultural treasure in the eyes of educated Europeans. Tourists, mostly well-born visiting Rome in the 16th century, were often guided to the overgrown amphitheater, not to loot it, but to marvel at its scale and the skill of the ancients. The first travel guidebooks of Rome appeared, describing the Colosseum's history and encouraging sightseers to reflect on the glory of Rome and the ephemerality of empire. At the same time, the papacy was coming around to the idea of protecting Rome's ancient monuments, balancing the impulse to reuse materials with the desire to preserve heritage. Popes in the 15th and 16th centuries issued some of the first edicts against wanton destruction of ancient structures. Pope Nicholas V, 1447 to 1455, while infamous for having quarried the Colosseum for St. Peter's, also regretted the damage and began to articulate the importance of Rome's historic fabric. Later, Pope Sixtus IV, 1471 to 1484, formally protected certain monuments, like the Arch of Constantine, and likely the Colosseum by decree, although enforcement was lax. By the 1530s, Pope Paul III, 1534 to 1549, took a more active role. He not only tried to curb spoliation, but even contemplated converting the Colosseum to a public purpose, famously proposing it be turned into a wool-spinning factory that would provide honest employment to Rome's prostitutes and poor. This visionary, if peculiar, plan to repurpose the amphitheater for social good showed that the leadership no longer saw the ruin as just a heap of stone. It was a structure to be utilized and preserved, not destroyed. Although Paul III's wool factory plan never materialized, it set a precedent of thinking creatively about the Colosseum's future. The most decisive papal action came in the 18th century with Pope Benedict XIV. By this time, the Counter-Reformation had imbued the Church with zeal to sanctify every aspect of Rome, even its pagan past. Benedict XIV, pontificate 1740 to 1758, formally consecrated the Colosseum as a holy site in 1749. Citing the largely symbolic tradition that early Christians had been martyred in the Colosseum, he declared the grounds sanctified by their blood. He erected large stations of the cross inside the arena, turning it into a venue for Christian pilgrimage and prayer. Crucially, Benedict forbade any further removal of stone or material from the structure on pain of excommunication. This edict effectively ended the Colosseum's time as a quarry. Under his and subsequent popes' watch, basic stabilization work was done to prevent further collapses, and the Colosseum's role shifted to that of a revered monument, a physical link to Rome's Christian triumph over paganism. Regular Catholic ceremonies began to be held there, and it became a stop for religious tourists as well as classical enthusiasts. Benedict's intervention was perhaps the single most significant act of preservation in the Colosseum's post-antique history. By 1750, the amphitheater was no longer just the haunt of vines and vagabonds. It was fenced, protected, and spiritually appropriated by the Church. The stage was set for the Colosseum to enter modernity not as a ruin to exploit, but as a monument to cherish. Romantic rediscovery and early restoration, 1700 to 1870 AD. As the 18th century progressed, the Colosseum captured the imagination of the world far beyond Rome. It became a centerpiece of the Grand Tour, the journey through Europe that young aristocrats and artists undertook as a cultural rite of passage. Virtually every educated visitor to Rome in the 1700s paid homage to the Colosseum, carving their name into its stone, or recording their impressions in diaries and letters. The amphitheater, with its gaping arches and grass-filled arena, embodied the romantic ideal of the sublime, the beauty of ruins that testify to the grandeur and transience of human endeavors. Poets and writers found endless inspiration there. In 1818, Lord Byron penned the famous lines, "While stands the Colosseum, Rome shall stand. When falls the Colosseum, Rome shall fall. And when Rome falls, the world." Byron borrowed this from the much earlier prophecy of Bede, but his popular poem, Child, Harold's pilgrimage seared it into the popular consciousness. Other literary luminaries like Percy Bysshe Shelley and Charles Dickens wrote evocatively about the Colosseum's melancholic atmosphere, Shelley meditating on political change amid ruins, Dickens describing moonlit nighttime visits to the weed-choked arena. Goethe and Henry James likewise commented on its blend of awe and decay. These romantic reflections elevated the Colosseum to an almost mystical status as a symbol of the fall of civilizations and the passage of time. Artists, too, were entranced. Giovanni Battista Piranesi's dramatic etchings of the Colosseum, mid-17th century, emphasized its crumbling grandeur, often imagining it larger and more broken than reality to stir the viewer's emotions. Painters like Thomas Cole depicted the Colosseum bathed in golden light, juxtaposed with scenes of Roman vibrancy to illustrate the cycles of rise and fall. Early photographers in the 19th century turned their lenses on the Colosseum as one of their first subjects, documenting its appearance in unvarnished detail. In short, the Colosseum became the must-see ruin, a subject for countless sketches, paintings, and early photographs that circulated through Europe, further cementing its legendary status. By the 19th century, replicas and souvenirs abounded, from paintings to tiny models, bringing images of the Colosseum to those who couldn't travel. It was during this era that the notion of preserving such antiquities for cultural heritage, and nascent, tourism really took hold. Alongside romantic fascination came scientific inquiry. The 19th century saw the birth of modern archaeology, and the Colosseum was a prime candidate for study. Pioneering archaeologists like Carlo Fea and Rodolfo Lanciani conducted some of the first systematic excavations and measurements at the site. They cleared accumulated earth to reveal the portions of the hypogeum, the sub-arena structure, that had been filled in over time. As scholars cataloged each arch and passageway, they gradually unraveled how the Colosseum had been built and how it functioned for the games. Ancient sources were collected and compared to the physical evidence, yielding the first comprehensive histories of the monument. This scholarly attention provided crucial knowledge that informed later restoration efforts. Significantly, the 19th century also brought the first real restoration projects to stabilize and conserve the Colosseum. After centuries of earthquakes and pillaging, large parts of the outer ring were at risk of further collapse. In 1806, another earthquake hit Rome, which prompted Pope Pius VII to take action while he was ruler of the Papal States, which included Rome. Pius VII, guided by both antiquarian interest and religious reverence, initiated repairs around 1807 to 1820. Massive brick buttresses were constructed to shore up the most unstable sections of the outer walls, essentially propping up the remaining facade so it wouldn't fall outward. Two of these brick wedge buttresses, one on the north, one on the south, are clearly visible even today, a testament to that early conservation effort. Workers also cleared centuries of rubble from the interior, revealing for the first time in ages the network of underground cells and passages. Visitor pathways were laid so that tourists, whose numbers were steadily increasing, could safely walk through the stands and explore the hypogeum without causing damage. Pius VII's project was one of the first to treat an ancient ruin with modern engineering and documentation methods. Detailed drawings and records were made of the Colosseum's state, establishing a baseline for future restorers. Later, Pope Pius IX, pontificate 1846 to 1878, continued this work. In the 1850s to 60s, Pius IX oversaw extensive excavations that fully exposed the hypogeum down to the original floor level of the amphitheater. He removed the medieval-era soil and debris that still filled many underground chambers, mapping out the rooms where gladiators once waited and animals were kept. He also installed the first wooden walkways and railings in the hypogeum, allowing visitors to tour it from above, a precursor to the modern tourist routes. Scholars from across Europe were invited to participate or observe, making the Colosseum's preservation an international affair and spreading best practices for archaeological conservation. By the late 19th century, the Colosseum was no longer in danger of imminent collapse. It was curated and maintained as a treasured site. A major political change then affected the Colosseum, the unification of Italy. In 1870, Rome was annexed by the Kingdom of Italy and papal rule ended. The new Italian government took ownership of the Colosseum, which by then was recognized as a symbol of national pride and continuity with Italy's illustrious ancient past. The Colosseum thus became not just a ruin in Rome, but a national monument for the Italian people. Preservation efforts continued under state stewardship, with professional archaeologists and architects now in charge rather than clergymen. The Italians cleared the remaining post-classical structures from the Colosseum's vicinity. Medieval houses clinging to it were removed, for instance, striving to restore an unobstructed view of the amphitheater. By 1900, the Colosseum had been reborn as a carefully tended ruin, structurally stable, historically studied, and emblematic of heritage rather than neglect, a national icon in modern times, 1870 to present. Under the Italian state, the Colosseum's status as an iconic monument has only grown. In the 20th and 21st centuries, it has been carefully managed to balance preservation, education, and tourism on a massive scale. Once Italy took control in the 1870s, the government invested in routine maintenance and appointed trained professionals to oversee the site. This included periodic restoration campaigns to fix weathering stone, the installation of facilities for visitors, and the establishment of on-site museums and signage to interpret the Colosseum's history. During World War II, the Colosseum, like many landmarks, faced potential threats. Rome experienced some bombing, though the city's ancient center was largely spared from heavy damage. The Colosseum itself was not directly hit by bombs. Nevertheless, precautionary measures were taken. Sandbags and scaffolding were used to shore up vulnerable parts, and cultural officials monitored it closely through the war. At one point in 1944, as the Allies marched into Rome, the Colosseum reportedly provided shelter to some displaced civilians, a full-circle moment of the structure once again harboring people in need. Its survival through the war was trumpeted as a symbol of Rome's endurance. After 1945, Italy undertook repairs of minor damage and used new conservation techniques, like concrete underpinning and chemical stone treatments, to further stabilize the aging masonry. By the 1950s and 60s, as international tourism boomed, the Colosseum was being visited by millions, prompting the addition of lighting for night viewing and better crowd management. The Colosseum's global significance was officially recognized in 1980 when it, together with the entire historic center of Rome, was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. UNESCO designation underscored the amphitheater's outstanding universal value as a masterpiece of human creative genius and a living testimony to the ancient Roman civilization. It also brought international support and funding for its preservation. By the year 2000, the Colosseum had also been named one of the new 7 wonders of the world in a popular global poll, further cementing its status as an icon of world culture. Managing such a heavy trafficked monument has been an ongoing challenge. In recent decades, over 6 million people visit the Colosseum each year, making it one of the most visited historic sites on Earth. This enormous footfall causes wear on the ancient stones, so authorities have had to implement strict measures, limiting visitor numbers at any given time, installing protective walkways, and conducting frequent conservation work on worn surfaces. The environment poses threats too. Air pollution from Rome's traffic accelerates the erosion of the travertine stone, and vibrations from nearby roads could affect its stability. Periodic earthquakes in central Italy serve as a reminder that the Colosseum still stands in a seismic zone. A 5.8 magnitude quake in 2016 caused concern, but fortunately no major damage to Rome's ancient structures. To tackle these issues, conservation teams have employed modern solutions, from laser cleaning of blackened walls to the use of 3D scanning and structural monitoring that can detect shifts or cracks in real time. One of the most significant modern restoration projects was completed in 2016, funded by a public-private partnership. Notably, the Italian luxury brand Tod's contributed 25 million euros. This multi-year effort cleaned the Colosseum's facade, removed centuries of grime, repaired and secured stone fragments, and improved visitor infrastructure, effectively giving the amphitheater a gentle facelift in time for its 1950th anniversary. The result revealed the blonde glow of the travertine as it might have looked in antiquity, much to the delight of preservationists. Even as it stands as a museum piece, the Colosseum has continued to serve as a functional venue on special occasions, albeit in ways far removed from its violent origins. Since the 18th century, the popes have led the Via Crucis, Stations of the Cross procession, to the Colosseum each Good Friday, a tradition revived in the modern era by Pope Paul VI in 1964. On that night, tens of thousands gather by candlelight around the darkened Colosseum as the Pope commemorates the Passion of Christ, a powerful image of Christianity's triumph in the very space that once witnessed alleged Christian martyrdom. The amphitheater has also occasionally hosted cultural events, concerts, opera, and theater, though usually just outside rather than inside to protect the ruins. In recent years, Italian authorities have even floated ideas to restore the Colosseum's arena floor so it can be used for performances and events once more. In 2014, an Italian archaeologist proposed building a removable floor to host everything from historical reenactments to concerts and even sports matches. After some debate, a plan for a high-tech retractable floor was approved. The new floor will both protect the underground chambers and allow visitors to stand in the center of the arena as gladiators once did. As of 2021, construction for this project is underway, signaling that the Colosseum's long history of adaptations is not over yet. From its conception as Rome's showpiece stadium to its current role as a cherished world monument, the Colosseum saga is one of remarkable resilience and reinvention. This amphitheater has embodied many things: the power of emperors, the brutality of ancient entertainment, the piety of Christian pilgrims, the refuge of medieval squatters, the resource for builders, and the fascination of scholars and tourists. Its arches have witnessed gladiators fighting for glory, martyrs meeting their end, nobles waging feuds, and popes offering prayers. Today, as crowds walk its ancient corridors in awe, the Colosseum stands as a monumental reminder of the heights of Roman ambition and the layered chapters of history that followed. In the words of Lord Byron, and echoing a prophecy over 1,000 years old, "As long as the Colosseum stands, it seems Rome herself shall stand." And through careful stewardship, this monument of power and spectacle will continue to inspire generations to come with its epic story carved in stone.